My name is Ryan. I'm 36. I run a construction company in Denver, Colorado. And on the night of my girlfriend's 32nd birthday, the woman I'd been with for 4 years, the woman I thought I'd marry, she stood up in front of 15 of her friends, placed her hand on my shoulder, and said, "This is Ryan, my walking credit card. He buys me whatever I want, follows me around like a little puppy, and somehow still believes I'm actually in love with him." She wasn't drunk, she wasn't joking. She meant every word. And that's the night I vanished from her life without a word. If you've ever been humiliated by someone you loved, if you've ever looked in the mirror and thought, "How did I let it get this far?" then I promise you're not alone. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay with me. Because the story I'm about to tell you, it's not just mine. It might be yours too. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before the sapphire earrings, before the lies, before I started measuring my self-worth by the receipts in her purse. I didn't grow up with much. My dad was a mechanic in Ohio. My mom worked admin at a local hospital. We didn't do luxury, but we did honesty, integrity. I learned how to work with my hands before I could drive. Summers were for fixing engines and building porches with Dad. Mom taught me how to make every dollar count and never show up late. After high school, I went to community college, then a state school for construction management. I wasn't aiming to be a millionaire, I just wanted to build something that lasted. When I moved to Denver after graduation, all I had was an old Honda, $600 though in a rusted toolbox. Now I own a construction company with 17 employees. We build high-end kitchens, custom outdoor living spaces decks, pergolas, outdoor kitchens. It's not glamorous. I still show up to job sites with dirt under my nails and sweat pouring down my back. I've dealt with city permits that made me want to scream and material delays that made me consider retirement. But it's mine. I built it with my own 2 hands. And yet, when I met Melissa, none of that seemed to matter anymore. It was at a charity auction my buddy Todd dragged me to. I had donated a custom backyard makeover to the event, thought it might drum up business. I was wearing the only suit I owned, navy blue, sleeves too long, shoulders slightly off. Looked like it came from my dad's closet. Then I saw her, Melissa. She wore a silver dress that shimmered like rain on a Bentley hood. Her hair curled perfectly, skin glowing, heels like weapons. She looked like she belonged in Manhattan, not mingling with HVAC guys and roofing contractors. She walked up to me first, said something like, "You look like you actually know how to fix something. That's rare around here." I laughed. She smiled. And before I knew it, she gave me her number. I remember texting her the next morning, fully expecting it to be a fake. But she replied in under a minute. "Good morning, Builder Man." The first few months were a dream. She made me feel like someone, like I mattered. Sex was electric. She laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones. She showed up to a job site once, in white heels and a Chanel bag, and immediately complained about the dust. But she still came. By month 6, she had a drawer at my house. By year 1, she was over 5 nights a week. Still kept her apartment downtown. Though, said she needed her space. I found out later I was paying that rent without realizing it. Emergency loans that never got repaid, a credit card she kept losing, a car that always seemed to break down right when a new designer line dropped. Red flags. Looking back, they were everywhere. But I was too far in. She called me her builder man, her project. Said she was helping elevate my lifestyle. And damn it, I believed her. There was this one time around our second anniversary. I mentioned I'd been thinking about proposing someday. She smiled, leaned in close, and whispered, "Then you better start saving for something blue." I like sapphires more than diamonds. She said it with a wink. But there was no joke in her tone. That night, I pulled out a velvet box from my nightstand. Inside was an old ring, my mom's wedding band. Gold, worn smooth. After Dad passed, she'd given it to me. Said, "Don't waste this on someone who won't get it." I'd taken it to a jeweler, had it resized, cleaned, ready. I never showed it to Melissa. Instead, I tucked it away again, like I was ashamed of where I came from. By year 3, things shifted. The teasing got sharper. You clean up nice for a guy who smells like sawdust. The compliments got scarce. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about projects I was proud of. And I started doing what I swore I never would, doubting myself. I told myself, this is what love looks like when you're punching above your weight. That maybe her snide comments were just stress. That her disappearing for work retreats with no itinerary wasn't suspicious, just corporate life. But deep down, I knew. I knew I was becoming something I never wanted to be. A man who stayed because leaving meant admitting the truth. That he'd built his life around someone who never loved him. Then came her birthday. I planned it for a month. Reserved the private room at Aspen Grove, this rustic chic farm-to-table spot she always mentioned. $250 custom cake with mirror glaze, $200 peonies from a florist that didn't even have a website. 15 of her closest friends, gift bags. Dessert wine from a tiny vineyard she once named in passing. And in my pocket, a pair of sapphire earrings from the jewelry store she always lingered in front of, wrapped in blue velvet. Dinner started fine. Laughter. Wine. The smell of truffle oil and overpriced chicken. Then the toasts began. Her friend Zoe went first some story about Cabo, a trip I apparently paid for but wasn't invited to. Then it was my turn. I stood up. Kept it simple, Melissa. I love you. I'm proud of who you are. And I look forward to who we're becoming. I raised my glass. Everyone clapped. Then Melissa stood, that smirk on her face, that look in her eyes. She placed a hand on my shoulder, nails sharp enough to draw blood. This is Ryan, my walking credit card. He buys me whatever I want, follows me around like a little puppy, and somehow still believes I'm actually in love with him. The room froze. You could have heard a fork drop. Then, laughter from some of her friends, nervous, high-pitched, like they didn't know if they were supposed to. Her sister Taylor looked like she wanted to melt through the floor. My buddy Dave just stared at his plate. And me, I sat there, staring at her hand on my shoulder, wondering how the hell I'd gotten here. I didn't leave the party in a rage. I didn't throw my wine glass, didn't yell, didn't even ask her why. I just stood up, folded my napkin with shaking fingers, and walked out into the cold Denver night alone. The sapphire earrings were still in my pocket, wrapped in velvet. I swear I could feel them burning through the fabric like shame. Outside, the valet handed me my truck keys without a word. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe he'd seen enough of these dinners to know when a man's heart had been fed to a table of strangers. I tipped him 20 and drove home in silence. No music, no calls, just the hum of the engine and the slow, creeping numbness in my chest. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch lights I'd installed myself flickered on automatically. I stared at them for a full minute before I killed the engine. This house, I'd spent the last 9 months renovating it on weekends, rewiring, replumbing, rebuilding one wall at a time. The backyard deck was handmade, every joint squared by my own hands. The kitchen custom walnut cabinets. Took me 4 weeks to finish. She loved them. Said they made the house feel less cheap. That night, I couldn't bring myself to walk inside right away. Instead, I sat out back on the deck I built, clutching a coffee mug with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. And all I could think was, how did I get here? The next morning, I woke up in my work boots. I'd passed out on the couch, still fully dressed. Phone on silent, screen full of texts. First, where did you go? Then, it was just a joke. Then, you embarrassed me. Followed by, I'm sorry, baby. Then crying emojis. Then voice notes I couldn't bring myself to play. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the garage and grabbed a small wooden box I hadn't opened in a year. Inside was my mother's old wedding ring. Gold band, no diamonds. Just solid, old-fashioned love. She'd given it to me a few months before she passed, said, only give this to someone who sees you. 2 months ago, I'd taken it to be resized, cleaned, polished. I was planning to repropose. Do it right this time with meaning. Now I just stared at it under the yellow light of the garage and felt stupid. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just like I'd been duped. And maybe I had. I dropped the ring back into the box and slid it onto the shelf behind my toolbox. Buried, for now. Let me rewind a little. You might be wondering how I didn't see this coming. Thing is, it didn't start out bad. The first time Melissa lost her credit card and needed to borrow a few $100. I didn't blink. She looked embarrassed, and I remember thinking, God, she trusts me enough to ask. That means something, right? The second time, she claimed her bank locked her account while she was traveling. Third time, emergency vet bill for her friend's dog. Then it was a tire blowout, a car battery, always just before a new season's fashion line dropped. And me, I'm a builder, not a banker. I don't check every Venmo. I don't audit every dinner bill. I trusted her. That's what real men do, right? But the joke started. You clean up surprisingly well for a guy who owns 2 flannel shirts. Oh, babe. Don't talk about drywall around my friends. They won't get it. You're like rugged, but in a cute way. Like someone I'd see in an HBO series about contractors. I laughed. At first, I thought I was lucky. That this glamorous, champagne and saffron kind of woman wanted me. That I was being upgraded. But in reality, I was being made small. One joke at a time. Around our 3rd year together, Melissa started staying over full time, but she kept her apartment. Said she needed her own space. What I didn't realize was she wasn't just keeping it. She was profiting off it. She told me rent was hard, that she needed help covering it until her next work bonus hit. I wired her $1, $200 that same day. What I didn't know then was that she'd already listed the place on Airbnb and was charging $300 a night. I was literally paying for her to rent it out while she lived in my house for free. I didn't find out about that until much later. But the first tiny twist in my stomach that started when I overheard her on the phone with a friend saying, Ryan's not exactly a genius, but he's reliable. He's useful. Useful. That's when I started second-guessing everything. You see, where I come from, men are taught to provide. You fix the roof, You cover the bills. You don't complain when someone you love leans a little harder than they should. But Melissa wasn't leaning. She was draining, and I was too afraid to ask why. Too afraid of hearing something I couldn't unhear. So I stayed quiet until her birthday. Until the moment she turned me into a punchline in front of a crowd of strangers I paid to feed. Let me tell you one more thing before I stop. The day before her birthday dinner, I left the job site early. We were behind schedule, and my guys weren't thrilled, but I wanted everything to be perfect. I designed the floral arrangements myself, picked her favorite dessert wine, spent hours putting together a photo collage of our 4 years, every trip, every smile, every sunset we watched on my unfinished deck with takeout and wine in plastic cups. And in the corner of that display, there was a picture of us at a construction site, me covered in dust, Melissa in heels, standing on gravel. She looked annoyed. I looked proud. She made me take that photo down before dinner. Said it didn't match the vibe. She didn't want people to remember what I did for a living. Didn't want her friends asking, "Wait, your boyfriend's the guy who builds decks." That's when I knew. Even before the toast, even before the hand on my shoulder and the smile that didn't reach her eyes. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a partner and started being a prop. But I'm not a prop. I'm not a wallet. I'm not a joke. I'm a man who builds things with his hands. And if she thought I'd just sit there and take it, she was about to find out exactly who she'd humiliated in front of that room. Because when I finally stood up from that table, I wasn't just walking away. I was waking up. After that night, something in me didn't just crack, it shifted, like a house frame slowly warping under pressure. My foundation gave a little, but I didn't collapse. I just stopped pretending, stopped making excuses for her, stopped hoping she'd change. And that's when I started to notice everything I'd been ignoring. The next morning, I tried to go about life like usual. Checked in with the crew at a remodel site in Cherry Creek, reviewed permits, signed off on a decking order. But my head was pounding. Not from alcohol. Melissa didn't drink much, and neither did I. It was the emotional hangover. The kind that makes your stomach tight and your hands cold. I caught myself spacing out during a conversation with my lead electrician, staring at a stack of plywood like it held answers. That night, I lay awake in bed, eyes wide open, listening to the whir of the ceiling fan. The bed felt emptier than usual, like her perfume had been scrubbed out of the air. And in that silence, memories started to surface. The small moments I'd dismissed, like the way she used to introduce me. "This is Ryan. He's in construction." But like fancy construction, always that nervous giggle after. That need to explain me. Or how she asked me not to wear boots to her office holiday party because they'd stand out. How she insisted we eat at restaurants with white tablecloths, where waiters asked if you wanted still or sparkling before you even sat down. How she'd gently place her napkin in her lap and say things like, "Don't talk about plumbing or lumber around Kate. She's in corporate law. You'll lose her." Lose her. Like my life was some dirty secret that didn't match the curated Instagram aesthetic she was building. I started replaying conversations in my head. Not the words, those I remembered. It was the tone that changed now. Her jokes didn't sound playful anymore. They sounded strategic. "You should let me help pick your clothes next time. That flannel's like aggressively Ohio. Can you not talk about your deck project tonight? It's all you ever talk about." And the one that stung the most said just 2 weeks before her birthday, "If I didn't dress you up, people would think I was dating a handyman." I am a handyman, a damn good one. And for a long time, I thought she was elevating me. What I realized now was she was erasing me. One night, about a week after the party, I walked into the closet and saw a line of clothes that weren't mine. Designer dresses, shoes in clear acrylic boxes, a Peloton bike she used maybe twice. Her things had taken over half the house, but somehow it never felt like she lived here. She had two lives, mine and whatever she kept in that sleek apartment downtown. The same one I was still quietly helping pay for through a series of temporary loans. So I went digging. I started simple. Bank statements, credit card bills, Venmo history. What I found was wild. Late-night Uber rides to hotels across town. Restaurant bills for two under names I didn't recognize. Spa treatments, shopping sprees. Random transfers out of my account for miscellaneous charges that totaled more than $3,000 over just 2 months. It was like discovering a double life, only I was the one financing it. There was a moment, I'll never forget it, when I found a charge to Neiman Marcus. $4,700, 2 weeks before her birthday. I remember asking her back then, "Hey, did you get something for yourself?" She'd smiled, tilted her head, and said, "Don't be silly. I'm just returning stuff for a friend." That night, she wore a new necklace. When I asked where it came from, she said it was a gift from her parents. Funny how her parents' gift had my billing zip code on the invoice. Here's where it gets darker. I found a receipt for a short-term rental company. The name on the listing matched her apartment address. It was an Airbnb. She wasn't just keeping her place. She was renting it out, for profit, while she lived with me for free, while I paid her rent. That knot in my chest, it cinched tighter. But still, some stupid part of me wanted proof. Something I could see. Something physical. So I drove to her building. The doorman recognized me right away. "Good morning, Mr. Ryan," he said cheerfully. I nodded, just dropping something off. "She's not in," he added. "Left earlier with a gentleman. Said they were headed to brunch." I felt the blood drain from my face. I forced a smile. "Right. Thanks." Upstairs, the key still worked. I pushed the door open slowly, like the truth might physically knock me over. And there it was. Men's sneakers by the door, a black hoodie on the couch, cologne I didn't recognize lingering in the air. In the bathroom, there was a razor that wasn't mine, beard trimmer, different toothbrush. In the bedroom, framed photos on the dresser, Melissa on a beach with a man I'd never seen before. The date on the frame. Same week she told me she was in Chicago for a pharmaceutical training. I didn't scream, didn't break anything. Instead, I pulled out my phone, took pictures, every corner, every item, every lie. Because now, this wasn't just heartbreak. This was war. Back at my place, I found a journal tucked in her nightstand drawer. I'd never read it before, always figured some boundaries were sacred. But when I saw my name scribbled across the top of the open page, I hesitated. Then I read, "Ryan's talking about expanding the business. Time to push for that Aspen trip. He won't notice the money if I time it right." Another page, "Act impressed by the kitchen project. Mar's new Gucci bag." Another, "Remind him how hard he works. Say he deserves to spend. He'll cave." Each line was like a cold slap across the face. This wasn't just a relationship gone bad. This was a strategy. I was never a boyfriend. I was a business model. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my garage, staring at the wedding band I'd hidden weeks ago. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel ashamed for who I was. I felt angry, but it was a clean anger. Focused, precise. The kind of anger that builds, not destroys. And I knew exactly what I had to do next by Sunday morning. I'd barely slept 4 hours in 2 days. But I wasn't tired. I was charged like something had snapped inside me and let the current flow freely for the first time in years. I stood in my kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee with both hands. Not because it was cold, but because they were shaking. It wasn't grief. It wasn't betrayal. It was clarity. I wasn't in mourning anymore. I was in planning mode. Before I touched anything of hers, I needed facts, clean, undeniable records. Because if Melissa was bold enough to humiliate me publicly, what else was she capable of spinning? I'd seen the way she could turn tears on like a faucet. Heard her friends say things like, "She's just intense. You have to understand her heart." I wasn't going to leave room for misunderstandings. This time, I'd build my exit like I build everything else, measured, precise, with no loose nails. I started by opening every shared financial document we had. It wasn't hard. She'd never bothered hiding much, probably because she assumed I'd never look. I created a spreadsheet and began categorizing. Emergency loans, $9,700. Designer expenses, $17,200. Mysterious travel, $11,400. Recurring Uber Black to hotel chains, $6,300. Spa and wellness charges, $4,900. MISC. Expenses coinciding with her business trips, $18,000 as planned. Over $67,000 in just the last 12 months. And that was only what I could track easily. She'd drained not just my bank account, but also the growth capital I'd been saving to expand my business. Every time I mentioned investing in new equipment or taking on a second crew, something always came up. A root canal, a cousin's wedding, a broken phone, another unpaid commission. But the most damning evidence, the charges tied to that Airbnb listing. Turns out she'd been subletting her luxury apartment for nearly a year without permission from the landlord. And the kicker, she was still collecting rent money from me every month. That afternoon, I walked through my house and began gathering her things. Not in a rage, not carelessly. I labeled every box like I was moving inventory out of a warehouse. Closet, designer, bathroom, skincare, office, electronics, shoes, unworn, jewelry, MISC. It took almost 4 hours. What amazed me wasn't just the volume of stuff, it was how much of it I didn't recognize. Dresses with tags still on, a backup flat iron, a monogrammed silk robe I'd never seen her wear. Her entire existence here had been curated like a carefully staged Airbnb. Meanwhile, my clothes had been crammed into half a dresser. When I reached the bottom of her vanity drawer, I found the birthday card I'd written her. Still sealed, inside was a handwritten note about how proud I was of her, how I believed in our future, and a weekend trip voucher to Santa Fe. She hadn't even opened it. I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash, slow, deliberate. It didn't hurt. That's when I knew something in me had finally broken free. First thing Monday morning, I made an appointment with my lawyer, James. He'd handled my contracts and business filings for years. No nonsense, always discreet. When I arrived at his office, he greeted me with his usual calm. But his eyes widened when I laid the folder on his desk. Inside, financial statements with annotations, screenshots of Airbnb listings, emails linked to her personal booking, photos from her apartment of the man I now knew as not me. Pages from her journal, highlighted. He flipped through slowly, then looked up. "This is quite a situation," he said. "I want to protect myself, my business, my name," I said. "And I want to make sure she never spins this into me being the villain." He nodded once. Smart. First, we document everything formally. Then we begin legal disengagement, financial, digital, logistical, no gray area. We spent the next 3 hours drafting a termination of financial support, certified letters to credit card companies removing her as authorized user, notices to all joint services and subscriptions, a cease and desist letter in case she attempted defamation. What about the apartment, I asked. I've been paying her rent for almost 3 years. James leaned back. If she's subletting without the landlord's permission, that's a major lease violation. I'm not looking to destroy her. I said, just end this clean. It's not about revenge, he said calmly. It's about protection. She's demonstrated she's capable of manipulation. You're simply closing the door before she finds a way to kick it open. I exhaled. He was right. I wasn't out for blood. I just wanted distance. And I was going to earn it, inch by inch. That night, I called the property management company for her apartment. I need to terminate my financial arrangement. I said, I've been paying rent for Unit 1506 under the name Melissa Davis. There was a long pause. Then the woman on the line said carefully, Sir, I need to inform you. The unit has been listed on Airbnb, which is a serious violation of our lease policy. I offered to send documentation, screenshots, guest messages, even the cleaning service schedule that had been emailed to me once by mistake. We'll investigate immediately, she replied. I hung up and felt lighter. By Tuesday morning, everything was ready. I loaded the labeled boxes into my truck. I took one last walk through the house. Then I found it. The small wooden box, the one with my mother's wedding ring. I opened it slowly. The gold band still gleamed faintly in the light, even after all this time. It wasn't meant for someone like Melissa. Maybe it never had been. I closed the lid, gently, respectfully, and tucked it away for good. That afternoon, I pulled up to her apartment building one last time. The doorman nodded. Big delivery today, Mr. Ryan. Last one, I said with a tight smile. I used her spare key, arranged the boxes in her living room. Tidy, orderly. On top of the final box, I left an envelope. Inside, copies of every financial document, photos of the other man, screenshots of the Airbnb listing, pages from her journal, a formal letter ending all financial and legal ties. My note was short. I'm not crawling back. Everything is documented. Your landlord knows. The black card is canceled. Any attempt to contact me or damage my reputation will result in this evidence going public. Your choice. I placed the house key on top of the envelope, and then I walked out. In the elevator, I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall. For the first time in years, I saw a man who wasn't apologizing for who he was. I wasn't her handyman, her fixer, her prop. I was a man who built things and who was finally ready to tear down what never should have stood in the first place. I pulled into the parking lot of my office just after 8 a.m. The sky was clear, but my stomach felt like I'd swallowed gravel. Today, every move would matter. I grabbed the stack of envelopes from the passenger seat certified letters to credit card companies, notices to every shared service, and the formal termination for financial support. In my mind, I ran through a checklist. Credit cards canceled. Joint accounts flagged. Property management informed. No turning back now. Inside, Drew, my business partner, was already in the conference room. Laptop open. Morning, he said, eyes narrow. You look ready for war. I closed the door behind me and laid the letters on the table. We're not playing games anymore. I need your help today. Drew nodded and stood up. Let's do it. First, we called the major banks. Their reps confirmed removal of Melissa as authorized user. I held the phone speaker to Drew's ear. Yes, we've received your certified letter. Card will be deactivated within 24 hours. Every click sounded like a victory. By late morning, we switched to the property management company. I dialed the number from my cell, pacing the bare floor of the empty office next door. Hello, this is Ryan Maxwell. I'm following up on the Airbnb violation at Unit 1506. She sighed, then told me they were already dispatching an inspector that afternoon. There's a strong chance of eviction proceedings if the lease is breached, she added. I thanked her, feeling a rush of vindication. For once, the legal system was on my side. At noon, I stepped out to grab lunch. As I walked past the receptionist, I noticed her glancing at my desk. On top lay a manila envelope, the one I'd left in Melissa's apartment. My note was the first thing you saw. Your choice. I bit my lip. It felt like daring her to read it, to see the blueprint of her lies. That afternoon, a name popped up on my phone, Alex Garrett. I'd shared his messages with my lawyer, a guy Melissa had been seeing on the side. He'd promised to stay quiet. But now, I answered. Hey, man. His voice was low, a mix of relief and fear. She thinks you're going to ruin her career. She's calling everyone her boss, her HR rep. She's claiming you're the manipulator. I leaned against my truck, closing my eyes. She's telling that story now. Well, the truth's got a couple thousand pages. What are you doing? Listen, he said. I've got screenshots. I can forward them to you if you want. But Ryan people believe a good sob story. That prick of worry hit me again. If Melissa spun a narrative of victimhood, my reputation in business could take a hit. Send them, I said, and thanks. I pocketed the phone and glanced at the office building. The battle was shifting online now. Back in the conference room, I opened my laptop. Emails poured in. Property management inspector arriving at 3 p.m. Please confirm access. HR at Melissa's firm. We've received a complaint alleging financial harassment. Are you aware? Credit card company card deactivated. Confirm you no longer wish to be associated. Each ping felt like another domino falling in my favor. Drew looked at me. You all right? I nodded. We keep going. At 3 p.m. sharp, I met the property inspector at Melissa's building. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. He walked slowly, clipboard in hand. I watched from the hallway. When he came out 20 minutes later, he looked at me. Lease violation confirmed. I'll file the report. I gave him a curt nod, relief flooding me. While he worked, I boxed up a few more items, her silk robe, unused skincare sets, and left them by the door. No emotion, no trashing, just cleaning house. That evening, I checked social media. Melissa had posted a tearful selfie with the caption, "When the man you love throws away 4 years over a joke, heartbroken." Comments poured in sympathy, shock, some anger at me for being too sensitive. I scrolled without reaction. Then I spotted a comment. I was at that party. She was joking. He's exaggerating. Curious. I clicked the commenter's profile. It was Emily, one of Melissa's college friends. Her posts talked about financial abuse awareness. I messaged her, "Hey, Emily. Thanks for speaking up. Mind sharing what you know?" Within minutes, she sent a screenshot of a group chat. Guys, I had no idea. She told me she and Ryan broke up months ago. She said he was controlling her finances like it was 2010. I just thought it was couple drama. Her voice notes followed. I thought it was weird, but she seemed so authentic about the abuse. I feel awful. Oh, suddenly, it wasn't just the banks and the landlord. It was public opinion. And that could be the biggest battlefield yet. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, the soft light catching the edge of the small wooden box with my mother's ring. I opened it, then closed it again. It felt heavier now, like a shield rather than a burden. That's when I realized my story needed witnesses. Not just bank statements, but people who could attest to who I really was. My guys on the job site, my clients who shook my hand and smiled, the couple at the $200K renovation who thanked me for rebuilding more than their kitchen. So I reached out, texted the hardware store owner who'd witnessed Melissa's meltdown when her card was declined, called Kevin, her CrossFit instructor, who confirmed she'd done the same playbook on him. Messaged Claire, the bakery owner, asking if she'd mind speaking to the press about Melissa's pattern. Responses came back quickly, each more supportive than the last. By the time midnight rolled around, I'd assembled a network of voices ready to back me up. And yet, despite every step I'd taken, I couldn't shake the final question. Would it be enough? Melissa was not helpless. She had connections, a polished public image, a tearful selfie that would tug at hearts. Tomorrow, the press office at her company might call. Tomorrow, a social media campaign could spin out of control. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my own blueprint in my hands. I had to finish this, and fast. I arrived at the office next morning to find a delivery slip taped to my door: eviction notice unit 1506. My stomach clenched. But it wasn't relief, it was finality. She had until the end of the week to move out. Inside, Drew was already on a speaker call with HR from Melissa's company. I stood in the doorway, listening as the HR rep explained. Mr. Maxwell, we've received documentation suggesting Ms. Davis may have committed financial misconduct and blackmail. We need to investigate internally. My heart pounded. This was exactly the reaction I feared, and the one I'd been preparing for. If she spun her story fast enough, she could brand herself as the victim of harassment and sabotage. I closed the door behind me. Thanks, Drew. Let's get in front of this. By mid-morning, an email from Neiman Marcus's security team landed in my inbox. They'd received a complaint about her scene last month when her card was declined and forwarded surveillance photos. She'd screamed, called security, claimed fraud on my part. Now I had proof to refute it. I forwarded everything to James, my lawyer, and CC'd Drew. Let's bundle this with the rest. Then I did something I almost never do. I logged into social media. The tearful selfie was still up. Hundreds of comments, sympathy, outrage, confusion. But something had shifted overnight. Amid the flood of heartbroken, and how could he? A new thread had woven itself through. Wait, what about all those designer bangs she got? And the Airbnb, I'm seeing receipts for $100K. I tapped that comment, then another, then another. People were starting to piece it together. At lunch, I met Claire at her bakery downtown. She greeted me in jeans and a flour-dusted apron. Your new cabinets turned out great, she said, eyes bright as she pulled out a sourdough loaf. But I hear you've been through hell. Her tone was gentle, but there was steel underneath, like she'd been through her own battles. She slid a wrapped loaf across the table. Thought you could use real bread, not that overpriced farm-to-table nonsense. Her small act felt monumental. I told her about the eviction notice, the HR investigation, the social media blowback. By the time I finished, her jaw was set. "I'm going to post an honest review," she said. "Not about you, but about how people exploit generosity. And I'll link to that financial literacy program you know, the one you mentioned." The financial literacy program, that symbol of turning pain into purpose, stared back at me in her eyes. I nodded. "Do it. And thank you." The afternoon brought a surprise visit, Kevin, her CrossFit instructor. He stood in my lobby, arms crossed. "Mind if I come in?" He told me he'd seen Melissa use the same playbook on him, late-night sob stories, fake migraines, invitations to live at his apartment under the guise of safe space. He'd ignored the red flags until she tried to list his gym on her Airbnb-scale work retreats. Kevin sighed. "I came to say you're not alone. You're doing the right thing." His endorsement felt like fresh air in a stuffy room. By early evening, I had a folder labeled Public Defense ready. Witness statements from Claire, Kevin, Emily, HR correspondence, security footage, the eviction notice, and in the center, a photograph of that old wedding ring, now perched on top of the box of her tools I'd found in her apartment, the one she never used. I stared at that image. The ring had become more than a symbol of a broken promise. It was a shield, wrapped in oak and steel. Just as I was about to shut my laptop, my phone buzzed, Melissa calling from a blocked number. My chest tightened. I stared at the screen, finger hovering. Then it went to voicemail. "Ryan, please, I need to talk. This is her last play. Don't ignore me." I deleted the notification. No ringback, no satisfaction. My phone buzzed again this time. "Claire, hey, I've set up a private group on social media for financial abuse survivors. Would you like to share your story there? It's anonymous, if you want. Comes with moderators and press contacts." I stared at the message. My story, my humiliation, turned into a beacon for others. I scrolled back to the group name, Breaking Golden Handcuffs. My finger hovered over the screen. Meanwhile, across town, Melissa sat in a cramped hotel room, her apartment long reclaimed by management. She scrolled through her phone, panic rising. She saw posts praising Ryan's integrity, videos of Claire's bakery talk. Comments from Kevin and Emily are trending under financial abuse. She pounded her fist on the bedside table. Game over. Back at home, I stood on my deck. Under the same porch light that once felt like a spotlight of shame. Now it felt like clarity. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. With a deep breath, I tapped the link Claire sent. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer fighting to prove I was the victim. I was fighting so that others wouldn't have to. I stared at the blank post window on the Breaking Golden Handcuffs forum, thumb hovering over the Share Story button. My hands felt steady, but my heart raced. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the custom walnut cabinets I'd built by hand. These cabinets had once been a symbol of my pride, until Melissa whispered that no one would understand the effort it took to build them. Now they represented something deeper, my true value. Unfiltered by someone else's agenda, I took a breath and began to type. My name is Ryan Maxwell. I'm 36 and I ran a small construction company in Denver. For 4 years, I believed I'd found the love of my life until one night she publicly called me her walking credit card. I spent months piecing together what really happened. As I wrote, The memories I'd locked away spilled onto the screen, the emergency loans, the Airbnb twist, the hidden journal pages. Every detail was a brick in the wall. I was tearing down not just her narrative, but the shame I'd carried. Claire walked in just then, flour-dusted hands resting on my shoulders. She peeked at the screen. "You ready?" I nodded, blinking back a surprised tear. "I think so." She smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "Let's do it together." We hit post at 4:16 p.m. Within minutes, notifications pinged supportive comments, shared experiences, messages thanking me for the courage to speak out. A few skeptics demanded proof, so I uploaded a cropped photo of the small wooden box holding my mother's wedding band. Beneath it, I captioned, "This ring was never about diamonds. It's about integrity." That symbol, the ring, had guided me from humiliation to empowerment. It was time it guided others. 2 days later, my phone buzzed at dawn. Email from the workshop coordinator at the financial literacy program. "We'd love to have you speak next week. Your story is exactly what our attendees need." I stared at the subject line. Invitation to inspire. My pulse jumped. Speaking in front of strangers, the idea of standing at a podium still made my palms sweat. But something in me had shifted. Fear no longer held the reins. I accepted. Meanwhile, news traveled fast. The HR investigation at Melissa's company concluded she'd violated multiple policies: fraud, subletting without approval, harassing a colleague. She was terminated, with no severance. Word on the street was she'd moved back to her hometown in Arizona, claiming abusive ex in interviews, yet her own friends there quickly saw through the act. Small towns don't let reputations lie fallow for long. I heard through Taylor, Melissa's sister, and one of the few people on her side at the party, that her parents refused to take her in until she got real help. The twist made me sad for her, then reminded me why I had to protect myself. That Saturday morning, I met Kevin at a local diner for pancakes. We sat in a corner booth, laughter and clatter all around. "So, you're really doing this speaking thing?" he asked, sipping black coffee. I nodded, stirring syrup into mine. "Yeah. Scary as hell." He smiled. "You've already climbed the biggest mountain showing your story. A podium's just more wood and nails to hammer." His words, simple as they were, felt like a blueprint break, big fears into small actions. At noon, I drove to the community center, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wore a clean button-down shirt, no flannel this time, but still sturdy denim jeans. Not because I needed to dress up, but because it felt authentic. Inside the auditorium, about 50 chairs were set up around tables full of pamphlets. The program director, Marisol, greeted me with a warm hug. "Ready, Ryan?" I inhaled deeply. "Let's build this." I stepped onto the small stage, heart hammering like a power tool starting up. In the front row sat Claire, Kevin, and Emily, my circle of truth-tellers. My hands traced the edge of the podium, smooth, solid, just like the ring back home. I began. "Thank you all for being here. I'm here not as a victim, but as someone who learned that respect, like a house, needs a strong foundation." I recounted the story, the charity auction, the Swarovski-like first impression, the jokes that cut deeper than any saw blade, the birthday party betrayal, the discovery of the Airbnb scheme, and the journal pages that felt like a blueprint of manipulation. I watched faces nod, wince, and lean in. I saw tears in Claire's eyes. I heard Kevin murmur, That's the damn truth. When I reached the part where I tore up the sealed birthday card, that symbol of misplaced trust, the room was silent, except for my voice echoing. I realized I'd been building a life on someone else's terms, and I chose to rebuild mine on my own. After I finished, the room erupted. Hands raised with questions. How did you muster the courage? What advice do you have for someone still stuck? Where can we find resources? I bounced from mic to mic, sharing tips on tracking finances, setting boundaries, and recognizing red flags. I held up a pamphlet from the program. This is where you start. Education isn't just numbers, it's power. Marisol slid beside me, smiling. You've given hope today. That evening, I drove home under a sky streaked with pink and gold. The deck outside my house looked different now, a sanctuary rather than a project. The porch light flickered on as I pulled up. I carried the small wooden box, my mother's ring, outside. Set it on the deck rail, where the wind could play with its edges. I stepped back and let it be the final symbol of this chapter, the final nail hammered in with respect, not shame. But stories never end, they turn pages. On my phone, I saw a new message from Melissa, sent from an Arizona number. Oh, Ryan, you win. You have everything you wanted: good reputation, new life. Please just unblock me so we can talk. I stared at the message. The same ring of words she'd used countless times, but now stripped of power. I put down my phone and walked inside. Claire was there, sipping tea. I set the ring box on the counter. She texted. She watched me calmly. What will you do? I picked up the wooden lid, feeling its smooth grain. This ring belonged to my mom. It's meant for someone who sees me for who I am, not what I can give. There's your answer. Claire reached for my hand. So, what's next? I smiled. A slow, genuine curve. Build something real? If you recognize your own story here, if you've ever been valued more for your wallet than your worth, leave a comment below. Share your experiences. And if this story helped you see a red flag, share this video to help someone else break their golden handcuffs. Because the best revenge isn't tearing someone down. It's building a life they can't touch.